morning. My name is Kat Miller, and we'd like to welcome you to Open Circle this morning. Please turn off your cell phones, and we'll remind you to turn them on at the end, sometimes. Today's Open Circle mission statement is going to be read by Marion Scruggs.
Open Circle provides a supportive environment to gather for social interaction and to improve our understanding of ourselves, our community, and our world. Presentations span a wide range of intellectual, cultural, physical, and spiritual topics. We do not necessarily agree with the ideas and philosophies of our presenters. We encourage you to listen with an open mind and form your own opinions.
Thank you. I'm going to take that and that. We're always looking for presenters for Open Circle. If you would like to be a presenter or know somebody who would, they're welcome to speak to Margaret Van Every, who's sitting right here, or to David Bryan, waving his hand over here. We are booked out about a year, though we do have some openings in the summer. So even if you're just thinking about it, it would be good to check it out. You can go onto our absolutely fabulous, wonderful, amazing website, opencircleajijic.org, and there's a place there where you can look at what it takes to be a presenter and kind of what you go through. It's rigorous. As you can tell, we have great speakers here. Sometimes me, so you know that, I don't know about that. But please do that. While you're there on opencircleajijic.org, you can check out where to sign up so you get all the information about what's coming up as presenters here. You can also do that on the board back here. We actually have paper and pen. Most of us still remember how to use it, so you're welcome to do that. What we do like to do is we like to welcome new-timers, people who are here for the first time. So if you're here for the first time, if you would please just stand up, we'd just like to acknowledge you. All right. Woo! Woo, woo, woo. Again, that memo is to you. Don't bring your cars if you're thinking of moving here. We do have seats. There's 2 seats here, and there's some seats in the gazebo for anybody that wants, still looking for seats. One of the cool things is you're going to be able to, if you're interested, is you're going to be able to download this talk very shortly. Brad Gorman does our videography, and he also makes all the talks available for free at Chapaladrone. It's a YouTube, chapaladrone. Nope, just youtube.com/ oh, Christ. Chapaladrone, YouTube, LCS. You'll see him. But he's making the ones from the beginning. Sorry, I slaughter it like almost every time. He's making the ones available over the last 7 years. He's uploading those so that they'll be freely available to everybody. And he's doing the most recent ones. And at some point, they will collide and everything will be available. So that's pretty wonderful. And we're very grateful to Open Circle and Brad for doing this for us. "We have your son," said the kidnapper. "I don't have a son," says the woman. "Then who just asked for warm milk and made us cut the crust off his sandwiches?" "Oh, God, you have my husband." A man was 72 years old and loved to fish. He was sitting in his boat the other day when he heard a voice say, "Pick me up." He looked around and couldn't see anyone. He thought he was dreaming when he heard the voice say again, "Pick me up." He looked in the water, and there, floating on the top, was a frog. The man said, "Are you talking to me?" The frog said, "Yes, I'm talking to you. Pick me up, then kiss me, and I'll turn into the most beautiful woman you have ever seen. I'll make sure that all your friends are envious and jealous because I will be your bride." The man looked at the frog for a short time, reached over, picked it up carefully, and placed it in his shirt pocket. The frog said, "What are you, nuts? Didn't you hear what I said? I said, kiss me, and I will be your beautiful bride." He opened his pocket, looked at the frog, and said, "Nah, at my age, I'd rather have a talking frog." With age comes wisdom. A woman receives her lover at home while her husband is at work. One day when they are both in bed, she hears the husband's car in the garage. She got home earlier than usual. So she screams at her lover, "Hurry, grab your clothes and get out through the window, immediately!" The lover looks out the window and says, "I can't go out the window. It's raining cats and dogs." She answers, "If my husband comes in and sees you, he will kill us both." So the lover takes his clothes and jumps out the window. On the street outside, he finds himself in the middle of the annual municipal marathon. He starts to run alongside the other participants, despite the fact that he is completely naked with his clothes over his arm. His racing neighbor looks up at him and says, "Do you always run the marathon naked?" The lover answers, "Yes, this way I feel total freedom." After a while, the runner continues, "And do you always take your clothes with you during the race?" The breathless lover answers, "Yes, of course. This way I can get dressed right away at the end of the race, and I can go home by car." Finally, the runner asks, "And do you always wear a condom when running?" "Oh no," says the lover, "only when it's raining." I know you had to wait a while for that, but... An elderly Canadian called 911 on his cell phone and reported that his car had been broken into. He's hysterical as he explains his situation to the dispatcher. "They've stolen the stereo, the steering wheel, the brake pedal, and even the accelerator," he cried. The dispatcher said, "Stay calm, an officer is on the way." A few minutes later, the officer radios in, "Disregard," he says. "He got in the back seat by mistake." Now, I didn't have to make that a Canadian, by the way. I had some choices. A little old lady was walking up and down the halls in a nursing home. As she walked, she would flip up the hem of her nightgown and say, "Super sex." She walked up to an elderly man in a wheelchair, flipping her gown at him. She said, "Super sex." He sat silent for a moment or two and finally answered, "I'll take the soup." Words of wisdom. The real test is being kind to unkind people. Far-fetched, I know, but... And thank you for your laughter. Makes it easier up here. Next week's presentation, A Shot in the Dark, presented by Phil Rylett. Vaccines were once heralded as the savior from the scourge of infectious disease. The worry of once commonplace and devastating diseases could be eliminated by a widespread program of vaccinations. Then why, a couple of generations later, are vaccinations feared and opposed with the same fervor as the diseases they allegedly prevent? Phil will look at one particular vaccination program that has gained so much notoriety that even the U.S. president has weighed in on the issue. The story might surprise you. Phil takes a look at the intriguing story behind the scenes of a vaccination that today is mired in controversy. Phil Rylett has spent his entire career in healthcare, first as a pharmacologist, then as a nurse, and then managing a statewide program for early detection of breast and cervical cancer. So that is our talk next week. Today's centering moment is led by David Dennis.
Good morning, everybody. Just a quick poll. Has anybody noticed that there's been a slight traffic increase in recent times? As I look across the field, I see the reason for that. Thanks a lot. Today's meditation, we're going to consider different things that come into your mind when you're sitting in Riberas in your car or in the bus and you're crawling along and it takes you 20 minutes to get to Centro, or when somebody cuts you off. How do those things make you feel? Loving, connected, warm. So other ways other than deciding, why did that person that just cut me off, why is he even alive? Let's sit in our chairs and allow the chair to hold you up and consider things like he's in a hurry, he's not a good driver, but he's still a good person, that sort of thing. What might you think to get you through those times when you're stuck? Something other than getting mad and judgmental. Messages you can give yourself. You can even meditate in your car. So sit for a moment and think of the different things you can tell yourself and different storylines for the person that just cut you off. Consider that for the next minute and a half. Take a deep breath and let yourself sink into your chair. take a couple of more breaths and enjoy your drive home.
If somebody has inadvertently picked up some sunglasses that don't belong to them, can you give them to me in a little bit? I would appreciate it. Somebody has missing their sunglasses. And if you are a thief, not good for you. This week's presentation, The Rise and Fall of a Foreign Retirement Community in Mexico, presented by David Truly. Mexico has a long history as a popular destination for often eccentric foreign retirees and expats. Recent changes in the socio-political climate and the influx of aging baby boomers, however, have resulted in a migration trend that has exerted significant pressures on both the natural and social cultural fabric of some retirement destinations. Private and public agencies now aggressively promote retirement migration to enhance Mexico's tourism development initiatives. Dr. Truly offers an overview of recent studies that reflect some of these changes in the Lake Chapala area and the role of the foreign and Mexican communities in this transformation. A brief review of tourism and retirement research will shed light on the unique nature of this community and its fragile existence. David Truly has a PhD in geography and has studied retirement migration to Mexico since 1997. Formerly a professor at Central Connecticut State University, he has taught at the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara and has conducted numerous studies on senior housing and health care through Mexico. He is currently living in Austin, Texas, and he used to be the head of the Tall Boys. Hey! Well, please join me in welcoming David Truly.
Well, hi. Why, thank you. Morning. Good to see you all. Really is. Nice to be back. I'm glad you read what I was going to talk about because I kind of forgot. So I appreciate you reminding me. Even though I've been in Austin, I have been coming back and forth, and came in yesterday. I have a series of meetings starting around 9 a.m. till about 1 in the morning with including professors from Mateso, the Jesuit University in Guadalajara, some developers that are opening senior housing homes, longtime residents, and a number of people to get a pulse on the various things going on. And I want to first apologize for the rise and fall. It sounds, I know, somewhat bleak, but it's not really that bad. But realize I live in Austin, Texas, and that's where they film Fear the Walking Dead. So, you know, everything on TV now is dystopic, and it's all these kind of, you know, catastrophic events. So, and my son's really into that. So, but the rise and fall, the other reason is I'm actually teaching at a prep school up there, and I'm teaching world history. And I couldn't help but, as we're talking about the Ottoman Empire and talking about the Mughal Empire and talking about these different generations of ethnic groups, religious groups, different groups taking over their groups. And the one theme that all comes up is tolerance. And the fact that you have tolerance or not. And I think what we're falling into in this time period is we're starting to see a really interesting cycle that I've always talked about, this kind of boom and bust that we've seen in retirement destinations in Mexico, and in particular here in Ajijic. For those of you that don't know me, I came in 1997 to really look and to try to understand what were the thinking, what was the kind of attitudinal and geographical differences between the people that came here, and particularly those that stayed here. And the reason I picked this location is it has a long history, beginning in the 1920s, honestly, as an international destination. It has attracted some very weird and eccentric and wacky people over the time, and it has also been through these occasional booms and busts. And what we're experiencing now is really kind of the perfect storm of a number of factors, which are leading to this intense pressure on this destination, on the relationship also, and this is my primary, it's always been one of my real things to look at, is this interesting, mutually symbiotic relationship that happened here between the foreign community and the local Mexican community. If you look in tourism research anywhere, what we find is many tourism destinations end up having problems with this disparity between what has appeared the very rich, ugly Americans or ugly any types of tourists that come in, flaunt their money and their time, and they leave, and that leads to tourist-targeted crime. And we've seen this over the years, many, many times. And I have to tell you, when I first came here in 1997, and I was sitting with some people, the first thing they told me was, yeah, I don't bring my nice car down here. I don't wear my rings. I don't flaunt what I have, because it's like putting the carrot in front of the horse. Eventually, that horse is going to bite that carrot. And there was an understanding of kind of that the expat community was kind of this, it was here but somewhat invisible, hiding out behind the walls, always coming out at different times. And I had the pleasure of speaking to people that had lived here. They were in their 90s at that point and lived here for years through those very interesting times when you had everybody from D.H. Lawrence, Tennessee Williams, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, all sorts of characters that have come to this place and come to this area for the climate, but also because it was a meeting and gathering place of the eccentric and people that could kind of get away. This place has always had that kind of strange spirit and this kind of tolerance. Even if you look back in the Hispanic times, this was an area that was never really controlled by any one indigenous group. It was kind of a little neutral place, you know, where people, because they had to get over the mountains to get here. So this has always had a special characteristic that I think is really interesting and fascinating. And those of you who don't know me, I also became one of my own study subjects in the process here, because I decided to leave my tenured position at the university, mainly because my wife, when our kids were 2 and 3, visiting here on my sabbatical, she realized she could have a nanny and a maid for $30 a week and said, "You're dreaming if you think I'm going back to Connecticut, so send the checks down south like all the other Mexican men do." So therein began my journey for the next 10 years of commuting for a couple years by plane and then finally saying, screw it, I'll just move down here. And we moved back generally for our children. We felt they were raised here in a perfect time. I mean, there's no place in the world where you can have 7-hour birthday parties. You know, I mean, they love that part. They go on forever. And so going back was a little bit tough to do, but it's been very interesting. It's given me a new way of looking at things in some aspects. But this perfect storm I mentioned, we have to look at some of the things, because it has been distressing to see the crime issues. And I will tell you that the last survey that I did, I saw the crime rate, and I really didn't repeat this very much because I didn't really want to scare anybody. But the point is, it's up around 38% of my last survey. In the past years, 1997, it was about 8 or 9%. In 2007, it was around 13, 14%. And this time, it was up around 38%. Now, some of that, if you break it down into violent or break-ins and petty theft, there's a variety of them. But the point is that it has become more of a problem. And this, too, happened before. When we came down here in 2006 and 2007 on my sabbatical, that was right before the kind of boom and bust of real estate in the United States. And in fact, this place was booming then too. And then it caved in. And then we had a number of issues that came to light. And so I'm going to talk about really kind of what's happening here, this perfect storm. Number one, stock market has gone out of the roof. For retirees, this is great for a lot of people. The real estate bust that we had back at that time has recovered, and a lot of people say we're getting close to that point where it's going to topple again in the United States. But so that has happened. We've also found ourselves in the middle, the true midstream of the baby boom retirement. Now that stream is basically ages 64 to around 73. Before, everybody, particularly real estate guys, were saying, when are they coming? When are they coming? I said, they're going to come, dude. You just got to relax. And they came, and they came fast and furious. And you add to that one other factor, which I think has been probably one of the most significant and, I don't know if troubling, but it's one that has brought upon this kind of rapid boom, which is kind of concerning. International living and numerous websites, numerous. My student did a study, and that increased from like 15 websites dealing with international retirement migration to something over about 50 now that cater specifically to the idea of retiring abroad, and a lot of them specifically in Mexico, because this has become, the spotlight has been on this place. And this is what has happened. In the past years, Lake Chapala area was generally under the radar a little bit compared to other places. San Miguel was very big for a while, especially among it became a very wealthy retreat for a while. Places like Cabo and tourism destination areas that were attracting retirees also became very important. But now, I'm sorry to tell you, it's Lake Chapala. It's everywhere. It's in every magazine. It's everywhere. So I remember when I did these, everybody said, David, don't tell everybody about this place. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It already happened. And the fact is, the word of mouth also, all you people that like to blog about your experiences, you have become the mouthpiece for everyone. So, and this is bound to happen. There was no doubt this was going to happen. And a lot of the things that are happening now are also just the fact of more people, the potential for more problems and more issues. We also have to take into account something else. We're in the midst of a government shift, locally, federally, in Mexico. Whenever this happens, there's chaos for a while until they figure out who's running what. Because basically, everybody that was in the last one is gone. If you don't know, for instance, just a great example, the tourism department basically has been kind of eliminated at the federal level, or just it's only focusing on very small bits of tourism development. In the past, there was a lot of interest in this senior living and ways to incorporate this. And so there's a state of flux here. And whenever that happens, that goes. And that's also when you see an upsurge in gangs and cartel stuff, because they don't know who to pay. Who do I pay? They don't know. And, you know, it is part of the reality of this changing dynamic of this country going through its own growing pains and finding its path. And we coming down there being in the middle of it. And the fact is, criminal elements anywhere, I don't care if the United States or anywhere, seek out elderly people. They're easy targets. I mean, they just are. You are. I am. We will be. And so these type of things have happened before. In 2006, this was very similar. What makes this different is we do have, AMLO is a different type of president. There's a very social component to his philosophy and his thinking. Talking with some of my Mexican friends, there is a lot of wondering of how that's going to affect relations and how that affect areas of development. One of the biggest problems that's developed, though, has to do with the false information of that you can live cheap here. This is affordable living, but it is no longer what I would say cheap. And I can tell you a gentleman that I talked to, because one thing I've been trying to do is keep track of people that have left. And why they left. And if I have time, we can talk about that. But it's not cheap. And the fact is, what has happened, though, in this flurry of also the political, bizarre world of the United States right now, the divisiveness that's going on in that country, has also been one of these other factors, this perfect storm. Just people, I hate that guy, I'm moving out. And then you see that happening, and this thing, oh, it's cheap to live there. And when International Living did that in one of their articles, and they retracted it at some point, but the genie was already out of the bottle. And so we have also seen a lot of people that have come here, I think, and I've talked to some of them thinking it would be cheaper than it is. And the problem therein lies then, what happens when they fall into real ill health? There's no social net for them. So there is a lot of issues that are coming along with this that is really pretty predictable in the sense that as this has grown very quickly, there's no true development codes. Infrastructure issues are, as we all know, a major concern, and probably will be the one limiting factor that will slowly change this. I will tell you, when we moved here in like that 2010, 2007, when we were here, my wife was down here, we went through this stage, and there were cartel issues. There were people in the mountains that were taken. There were Mexicans that were killed. We saw that. I had little blonde, blue-eyed kids, and, you know, the concern. You kept your head down. and you were fine. And there's no reason to believe that it's targeting us, but at the same time, sadly, we also are living in a time internationally where anti-immigration, lack of tolerance is a huge issue. It's everywhere. And it has sadly, and very sadly, it has migrated down here. The political divisiveness has come down here, which is a real tragedy, because when I was down here in 1997, I remember all the people I talked to, and we'd be sitting, and you could never tell who had money, who didn't, what the thoughts were. Says, we never talked religion and we never talked politics. Never. That's what they said. And that's why things were pretty cool here for a long time. When we start digging into that, and I think this is the problem, this animosity that has kind of been raised, it's infectious. I teach my kids in school about spatial diffusion and cultural diffusion. Ideas are moved by people and things, and so are bad ideas and bad attitudes. And so we're in the midst of kind of dealing with this, which is a much more difficult thing to do because it's global. And there's reasons to understand this. I teach my kids about the right nation states and the fact that in Austria, this is a country that has a birth rate that's so low they're not reproducing enough to their own population of Austrians. So they're bringing in people from Turkey and everything to work. And there is a fear that, okay, one day if you wake up and 70% of the population is Turkish and speaking Turkish, do you call it Austria anymore? So, I mean, these are legitimate issues that we're facing in the world globally. And sadly, there are some people that have decided, and governments and people, it's very easy, and we all know this, when things get bad, it's always the easiest thing to do is to blame other people for the problems. So that is one of the things that's kind of fueled some of this. And the best thing you can hope for in a place like this is just not to do that. Simply put, this is not the place to bring that stuff, because this is a place that I feel should be respected for that tolerance that's always been here. I think that is mandatory. I also believe that when you look at this, we see, the real estate prices, they go up. They did this before, and I've had some people that have called me. They said, I'm going to go down, and I say, well, make sure you take some time, look around, and rent for a while. Well, it's hard to rent now, so now people have just bought up everything, right? And it's raised those prices. Well, let me tell you, the people that bought at that period, and I know a lot of those people that bought in 2006, 2007, right before everything went down, and they had to wait, a lot of them, 7 or 8 years to sell because it went down. So, my advice to people that haven't bought is, it's a fine place to go, but try and be very careful about this U.S. and mentality of being able to turn around a house and make another quick $50,000 or $75,000, because there's a chance you may sit on that house for a long time. And these are some of the things that fuel it. We're going to see a lot of the restaurants opening up, and then if the crime increases, which my sense is, I don't know if it's going to increase. I mean, they've called for help, and I do believe this is a real time, though, for everyone. You just have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be smart about it. There's little things about looking around where you're going, when you're going to places, being cognizant of that, getting to know neighbors and establish relationships is really important, because that's the kind of the basis of kind of just the kind of neighborhood watch idea. Now, what we're seeing in these surveys is, the good news is, and I do have good news, is that a lot of the people that come down seem to have a real affection and affinity for the Mexican culture. And that is, when I did this original research, this matrix that I developed really looked at, there were 2 factors that really spun people around. One was this idea of dissatisfaction with their home country. And this gets into that area of, certainly people that have moved down here recently are very dissatisfied, some of them, with the political aspects of it. Other people, then the other one was their affinity for the Mexican culture and lifestyle. And what I saw in the past was a lot of new people coming down, felt like they could live like they live in the United States down here in Mexico. It's possible. It'll cost you more. It'll cost you more than you think to live just the way you lived up there in a lot of ways. There is a kind of Mexican foreign lifestyle here. You find a sweet spot in the middle. But these two little questions that I did split everybody off into groups. And it really indicated those people that were the most interested in supporting the local Mexican community through philanthropic things versus some people that really seriously integrated into the community versus some people that were really here to kind of enjoy the great climate, the low cost of living, and, you know, the cultural thing they really didn't take into consideration. I will tell you that even though many people can speak English here, they're here Mexicans, the fact of the matter is this is a very different culture. And if you are not used to adapting to different cultures, it will be difficult to adapt. And there are still people that, you know, I tell the story every time, but it happens every time. I was at the bank again. I came down, and somebody has said, do you know, are they going to start training them to speak English? And I'm going, I said, why can't they speak English? I said, I don't know, maybe because it's Mexico. What do you think? But, you know, it's a thought, you know, but I understand it, and I'm not being pejorative or poking fun. The reality is we've encouraged a lot of people to do this, and because we are travel crazy, and because baby boomers in particular, the good news is baby boomers in particular represent a group that has traveled more than previous generations. They're better educated. Their residential mobility rates, that in simply just means moving from different parts, whether it's from New England to Texas or California to Texas, which all the Texans hate, by the way, or any part of the country, you still have to adapt a little bit to the culture, that way of life that's different there. People that have done that a lot do well here. And we're really seeing a lot of people also, more Europeans. We're seeing a greater diversity of people coming to that area. That is the good stuff. The bad stuff is when all the prices get up, all the cool art, funky people can't afford to stay here. And look at Greenwich Village in the 50s and 60s. It was a hangout for all the great artists, and then all the rich guys that wanted to be writers and artists moved there, and they had to move them out. And so then they were just stuck with those guys. This is gentrification. This is a process. There's nothing wrong with it. It just happens. And so, but the beauty of it here is, and I believe that this is where we're still in the middle here. We are in this boom and bust cycle again. And I think right now we're kind of up at this critical point of this boom. We're seeing lots of people coming down, and there's a lot of reasons. And from my mind, looking at the survey data that I'm collecting and the people out of Iteso University, it does make me a little optimistic about some of their answers to what they want to do here and the people they like to be with and trying to interact more with the Mexican community. And I remember I did for Lake Chapala Society, we did a study, and the Lake Chapala Society over years has had very different purposes, or at least with the people over the year. And something that's very obvious is the growing number of people that wanted more of that Mexican foreign interaction. And I think these are the type of things that have made this place so special over so many years. Now, the problem with this crime stuff, if you'll find out, and this is another result of some of the anti-immigration issues, and is Mexicans that have been in the States that maybe have some criminal past that are getting kicked out of the United States. We're seeing a lot of Mexicans, and my Mexican friends have verified this, Mexicans that aren't from Chapala, aren't from this region, that are coming to this area. Because you're here. You know, you're kind of easy marks. And so this is part of it. And I think there was a lot of times when people say, well, the crime here isn't as bad, you know, but look at other cities. But yes, in Austin, it's big, but Austin's got 1 million people. This crime, the issue that's happening now is what happened before. We saw this again when we had this switch in like 2006, 7, and 8, and 9 and 10, some cartel issues. And generally what happens is it mellows out. It calms down. And also over time, there will be some of you people that are here now that won't be here, probably in maybe even another year. I met somebody the other day that moved here a year ago, put their house on the market, and they're moving back. They bought impulsively. They bought fast. And I've given talks to real estate agencies in the past, and they're the gatekeepers. But you know, they're trying to make a living. People want houses, they get it, and the best you can hope for is that people take into to seriously consider the fact that it is still another country, another culture, and particularly given this kind of tribalism that seems to be invasive around the world, you have to keep that in mind, that there's like a dirty kind of pollution that's kind of floating there, that's kind of tainting the air right now. Hopefully, that too shall pass. You know, I mean, that's all we can hope for. But in the meantime, you know, the importance is trying to develop that tolerance and realizing that in this country, you're going to be subjected to the ways of this country. And I can tell you, I've been talking to some of the developers that are talking about communities here. This one group, La Paplita, that's working on years for a project on the west side of town. And it is apparently going, and it's the slow process that it takes to go. But one of the reasons is understand that within Mexican tourism development and Mexican development in general, the major theme, and we see this in the literature, in tourism development and every type, is bigger is better. That is the Mexican kind of stance. When you look, when ecotourism got so popular, there was a choice between an ecotourism development and a 20-story, you know, Hyatt. Go for that Hyatt, right? Because it's more money, more construction money, more money to be made, more workers, more this. This may be sustainable in the long run, but this is it. And one of the things that needs to be expressed, and I remember about a few years ago, there was a company from Spain that were proposing a development over in Chapala. And they had a big launch, and they did it over behind in La Floresta. And they showed these like 29-story buildings and a bowling alley and a convention center that they were going to build. And it was hilarious to watch the foreigners' responses. I thought they were going to throw tomatoes. It was just so, you know, and that message got out. But even in the municipalities, the one that they're just talking about now, 4,000 units over about San Nicolas. I mean, you have to realize that this is becoming, this is kind of the nature of the beast here. And the only thing that I think can help us is the fact that, honestly, the infrastructure can't support it. And that, I think, is one of the things. I mean, to really address some of the infrastructural issues, I mean, you're talking about blowing holes in mountains and making roads and stuff like this. That takes a long time. And in this country, everything lives in 6-year increments. Politically, it does. And then it's like everything's gone and you start all over. And so that's on our side because it's hard for those big projects to go. But that is the mentality. Now, a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of people that I think that these senior living communities that people are bringing up, there's a lot of them coming up, and I've done a lot of work for them, and I think there's an important value for those. One of the things, obviously, that I have seen, and I have to pass this along, this is an interesting conversation. You know how with Mexicans, when you ask them if they have direction somewhere, even if they don't know, they're like, dos o tres cuadras, más o menos, izquierda, derecha, and you go, I'll go down there. Well, this lady was talking about her friend had a stroke, and, you know, she'd go to see her, and her friend, and she said, I'm getting better, because the nurses tell her, you're getting better. She's probably not getting better, but it made her feel good, and she said, that's the beauty of that compassion. The fact that you're getting better every day, ma'am. Every day you're getting better. Maybe she is, maybe she's not. But there is a certain compassion, and there's a nature of the Mexican culture that certainly we've lost sight of a lot of aspects in America. And my kids have talked about this a lot since they're up in the States. And I think these are the types of things, as we see this continuing kind of movement, and we're going to see this, so don't be surprised, you know, if things get a little, I mean, my sense is it's going to be a little bit dicey for a while, because this is just the nature of this shift in the political situation. People trying to work things out, trying to come to grips with governments. And, you know, as long as the foreign community can appear to be a benefit, then we're going to always be welcomed here, because there is no doubt that the economic benefits are great, but even more so are those socio-cultural benefits. I mean, over the years, the people I've talked to, since the ladies I talked to in 1997, who were 88 years old and had put 10 kids through college, school teachers on like $1,000-a-month pension, right? They lived here and they taught English, and these were the markers that made this community what it was, why it was so special, and always understanding. I'll never forget talking to the delightful lady Louise Harrison, who now died. She died a few years ago at 103, and she told me, I told her all this stuff, and she goes, well, I said, why did you always do that? She said, well, I'm a guest here. And I said, she'd been an immigrata for years. I mean, she's lived here, but I'm a guest. I'll always be a guest, no matter what whatever the legal people say. I'm still a guest. And I think that is the essence of the lifestyle here. And it is a lifestyle. For so many people, newly retired, realize you got a year of the honeymoon phase, where everything's cool, man. You're off every night, and you can go out, and you can drink, and you can dance. And I've said this story before, but it still sticks in my mind. My friend of mine, John, years ago, he was down here, and I'd always see him out when the Tall Boys were playing. He was dancing, drinking, having fun. And then I saw him in the park one day in the plaza, and I said, he didn't look his jovial self. How are you? He said, I went to the doctor. And I said, was there something bad? And he goes, oh, no. He said, I can live another 20 years. I said, well, that's good. He says, that's a whole damn new career. What am I supposed to do with 20 years? At 60, what am I doing? Do I have to start a business? What do I do? I can't do what I'm doing now every day. I know I'll die. So, I mean, this is the beauty of this community, and through things like Lake Chapala Society, but all of the things that have branched off of it are these opportunities to have a lifestyle. And have a lifestyle that is beneficial not only for you, but beneficial for the for the Mexican community around you. And I think this is the stance, this is the mental kind of mindset we need to push and promote. Because without that, the divisiveness will stay here. It will divide us. It will bleed into other areas. It's contagious. This kind of hostility and animosity is contagious, and you just have to stop it. So, finally, what I'd like to talk just a little bit in this last couple of minutes is senior care living is another one of those areas that I think is going to be increasingly important. One of the things that people are going to have to decide on is using their Medicare, staying down here, and you're going to see this become, I think, a really big issue. And I can tell you at the University of Texas in Austin, there's a gentleman that had worked on issues about bringing Medicare to Mexico years ago. It fell apart. It's always been moments when it has gained momentum. My sense is if you see people doing that momentum again, you should join that momentum. Because one of the reasons it's never really gotten off the ground is because there's never been a kind of unanimous of support. For instance, there's Paul Christ, who lived in Vallarta, and he did a lot of efforts and went up to the House of Representatives, even did some talking about this years ago. There's people in the Yucatan area that have brought up issues about this, but they've never done it as a very coordinated effort. But as we look at the changes that are going on in the United States, and there are changes. If you look at the House of Representatives, the diversity in that House of Representatives is truly amazing. And if you start to look at what's coming down the road, this globalization, no matter who wants to stop it, it's way too late. We can talk about turning back the clock, but it's not going to be turned back. It's going to continue. And this kind of march to a global society. My son said, "Oh, you mean like Star Trek?" And like, yeah, it's like that. It's like, or any of the sci-fi things, but they go to that place where it's a global community. It's a very difficult thing to do because of nationalism and nationalist movements and these type of things. But we're starting to see that, and I think politically, that's going to gain some impetus. And I think as you see places open down here, I think these senior communities are going to be very, very valuable because in a sense, they're going to hopefully be the social net for people as they need it. And hopefully, as this continues, and I've been talking to some people that are talking about doing some really good things as far as kind of rating and looking at the different senior homes, what they offer, offering some objective information so people can make choices about these things. Because this is a benefit. When these communities open, realize that unless we build more houses, so when people get to the point, and people come to me and say, look, I've had a house for 15 years here, I love it, but the upkeep, and if I can go to a place that offers me the privacy and that the socialization that I'd like to have, that's what I want. And then that also means you're putting a lot of people in one area. That means no more, let's don't build another tract with another 50 homes here, another 100 homes here. This is going to be kind of the next step that's going to dictate how much this place grows. So as these senior homes develop, as all of these things continue to grow, keep in mind that really this is all about being tolerant, being mindful of where you are, and enjoying what you have here, which is, by the way, pretty stinking awesome. Let's face it. And, I loved it here. My family, it was a great place to raise our kids. It was phenomenal. And I think it's up to us, though, to make sure that it stays that way, each and every one of us. Thanks.
So I'm sure you have some questions, and there's a lot of us. So if you'd raise your hand, Mike will be brought to you. And it really ask a question. I know what your thoughts and feelings are about things would be really interesting, but for today, let's do questions. So where are we starting? Right here.
Having just told all these people that crime is up 38%, I would like to know more about that. First of all, where that data comes from, what the numbers are in the increases, and what the categories are, because I think it could really inflame a lot of stuff saying that.
Yeah, I mean, this data is being collected as we speak. It's been from the last year, and this is combined with some surveys that I did through you guys. Some of the people here were participating in. There's some ongoing surveys. And by the way, if you see surveys going on, answer them. It's really good because without the data, it's hard to predict things. The sample size is probably around 600 or 700. Is it statistically completely accurate? I don't know. That's why when I say 38%, realize that I'm also saying some of that is very small petty theft, sometimes domestic. The actual numbers and breaking down to what group is like a break-in or violent, they haven't done that yet. They have not taken those apart. They have not been. The University of Ateso, myself, some other researchers that are doing this. I don't know what the government's doing, but I don't really look at that very often. I mean, I look at it, but I don't know what they're doing. And so we like to try to do these things through the people themselves. And realize that I think that while I say that I saw that number, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? I think a lot of those are, like I said, I think some of those things are visitors came for the first time, did some, I mean, some of the people described me what they did, and they even admitted it was really stupid. I shouldn't have done what I did. So don't harbor it, but just realize that, yes, but this has happened before. And, one of the biggest problems with information down here is getting accurate statistics because no one, including the Mexican or the United States side, there is no coordinated effort to gather information, let's say from Instituto de Migración, from the consulate. There's nobody putting all those numbers. So what we're left with is doing surveys from professors and schools to try to get those answers and to give them to you. So in essence, that's, I can't really break it down that much. A lot of those crimes were very petty theft things, like I'd say, I would just get off the top of my head, like maybe 40% of those were like maids or people that were taking things from people's homes and things like that. So, but don't get too, it is a problem, and boy, for the foreign community, working with the local government and doing the things you do, that's all you can do. I know there's a lot of issues. People talk to me about the police and the things they're doing and not doing and these type of issues. And, you know, what I have seen over time, the times I've lived here and talking to people, that generally that stuff works itself out as these governments mature. I mean, this really is an issue of political things. When they change, it takes a while for them to get the ball rolling. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Back here.
You both mentioned the tall boys. Who are they?
I know. There's bad people that drank a lot of tequila and pretended to play music. I heard about them a couple times.
A real question. Hold the mic. It's out. It's an out angle.
You mentioned senior homes. Are we talking about the need for them or actual projects on the books, and they will be built shortly?
Yeah, and when I say senior homes, senior developments is a better term probably, because there's already it's really a cottage industry has grown up here with like Alicia's, and a lot of these places offer assisted living and some with different levels of care in very kind of retrofitted homes and this type of thing. But for instance, this La Pueblita project is on the books, and apparently they're opening up showrooms in, I don't know, next month or so.
Where?
On the west side around Tres Cañadas, that's one. There's another one that opened up by the Billy Moon Group, I know. There's individuals that are opening up smaller ones. There's people talking about little co-op ventures together. And I know this larger one is more like a CCRC, like a continuing care retirement idea of coming in when you're in good health and finding a way so you can stay and stabilize throughout the end. So, but I mean, realize that this will happen here, because this will happen in Mexico. Because my students at the Autónoma, when I ask them, how many aunts and uncles you have? 20, right? How many brothers and sisters you have? 1, 2. The Mexican family size has dropped from something like 5.7 down to about 3.3. I mean, the nuclear family has come here. They take them. They want their kids better educated. So the ability for those that used to be the youngest daughter of 7 to take care of that Mexican family, that's not happened. There's a big development in Mexico City. It's an upscale one, but it's packed, and it's the U.S.-run one that's there. So you're going to start to see these, and I think in the long run it's going to be a good thing for a lot of people. Sure.
Over here.
Hi, David.
Ruben.
Can you tell us what the turnover rate?
David, hold the mic out,
Can you tell
please.
us what the turnover rate is? You know, when we came here many years ago, they said it was 7 years. And, you know, we've been here a long time, and we see very many new faces. So
Yes.
do you have any idea what the turnover rate is today?
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, when I did the first research in 97, the turnover rate was 6 to 7 years. And realize that number is actually, we find that in retirement migration history as a general term. We saw that even with people like moving from New York to Florida, or moving somewhere like 6 or 7 years, and then they returned home to go home because of health reasons or family. Grandkids, it becomes a big one. The turnover rate now, it was getting much longer. We were seeing people staying for longer periods of time, but just from the little data that we've collected over this last year that was just shared with me from these people at Ateso, it seems like we're going through, I think there's a couple of things. We're going through a quicker turnover. I think there are some people that are coming down that I know of. I mean, I saw a few in this survey that were, you know, here for a year and are already going back. So I think that's kind of making everything a little turbulent. And the other thing is just this massive kind of, I call it really retirement tourism. A lot of you people, you know, coming down to look for potential destinations. And then what happens is a lot of them, I know they got nervous, can't rent anything, so I'm going to buy something. So this has kind of fueled a different type of turnover. And I know that I have seen a lot of people in my work, and I've been tracking, that were people that are here 10 years plus. Usually when you get past 10 years, in the past, the likelihood of leaving was pretty small. But you know what? A greater percentage of those people are leaving now. And I think one of those reasons is because this is a transitional community. I mean, you either leave or you die. So I mean, it is transitional. I mean, a lot of the people I knew that came to Tallboy, they're not around anymore. And, you know, and I think this is indicative. There is a transitional phase. I do think, when I look at this boom and bust, I think that every 10 years we see that substantial increase again. I mean, it really looks like that. I mean, when I look at it, and I was going through like books published even back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, living in Mexico for $500 a month. And then 10 years later, live in Mexico for $1,000 a month. And then, you know, they went on and on. So is a turnover, I think you're seeing right now, it's a very interesting time. You're also seeing some speculators in there that are fueling some of this stuff, which isn't helping.
In the back, way back.
I've lived in Mexico for 20 years, Mazatlan for 16, and here for 4. I'm actually moving back to Canada. It's called A New Relationship and Grandkids. But one thing you didn't mention was the need to learn Spanish and how helpful that can be. And I know you speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Why didn't you mention that? Because it can help, obviously, one integrate into the community.
Well, I guess I kind of figured you knew that. You're in the country, and you're absolutely correct. Now, the one interesting thing I will say that when I looked at people that in my studies, when we looked at these critical factors of the ones that stayed the longest and everything, a lot of these little old ladies never really learn Spanish that well. Some people just can't learn it that well, but they find ways to get along. But certainly, without a doubt, I mean, learning that culture, and the most important part of any culture is language. That dictates everything. So it's kind of a given that that's an important thing to do. Right. But thank you for bringing that up. It's important to say.
Over there.
I've been involved with Medicare in the United States for the Southern Maine Agency on Aging. And I'm curious, how does, you mentioned possibly some possible movement down here to, there is some coverages for some people through some Advantage plans, and
Yeah.
but I'm more interested in how does one go about bringing the effort or making the effort to bring maybe Medicare to people who live down here, get that coverage down here, where Medicare disallows that presently. What is type of movement do you suggest or think is going to happen that might make that happen with the federal government in the United States?
Well, there you will hear and read about. Occasionally, you'll hear a blip. Somebody post something online. There's a group, and they've talked to me a number of times. Different groups pop up, and what I try to tell all those people is, oh, you should contact this guy over in San Miguel who's working on that. You should contact this guy in Mazatlan that's talking about. You should contact. So when I was bringing that up. The problem I've seen in the past is these little small groups of people get around and they start doing something. Obviously, going to your constituents, go to your congressman is one way that they've done it in the past, but it's got to be more organized and more solidified. You know, more as a. And one of the things that does happen here is that a lot of foreign communities aren't always very much in touch with each other. And I'd be interested in talking to you sometime. Mazatlan, you know, people don't know what's going on in Mazatlan, Ajijic. They're different. They're different communities, different vibe, San Miguel. And so trying to join those together in efforts like this, I think, are some of the things that may get that impetus for that.
But there would be a benefit from the, okay.
Let's take another question. We're back in the back.
Hello, David.
Hello.
My question is, you haven't touched on it this morning. We have 2 hospitals being built here, and I know that you spoke to a lot of officials yesterday. I wonder if you could throw any light on it, and if these 2 hospitals are going to offer enough services that we don't have to trot up to Guadalajara for our MRIs and our heart problems.
Right.
Thank you.
My information on the hospitals, what I can tell you is that I believe, and I have not talked to those guys lately, but my understanding is one of the private one is going to be kind of a private public, so there's going to be some mixture of services and the markets it serves. But there has always been, among many doctor groups and hospitals, of the idea of bringing a hospital here. The problem has always been one of the economies of scale. Exactly how many beds do they need? How many people will use it? Are they going to use it here? How many people will really do those heart operations here versus use Medicare? This has been always the stumbling block between this. However, I do think that I think over the next 10 years, I really do believe you're going to see numerous hospitals, numerous kind of clinics. One of the things that I know some of these senior housing larger groups are talking about is offering some sort of I don't want to say insurance, but some sort of medical incentives. Like in the States, you'd have to pay like life estates. You put down a bunch of money and, you know, they guarantee you some money that back, or a fixed rate on long-term care. And I think some of these are talking about offerings kind of like an in-house discounts at hospitals that may be involved and doctors that may work with them. Because very often the decision to stay here, and I've talked to many people, to stay here and have an operation done or to return to the States and use Medicare really comes down to just putting the numbers down, because for some people, I'm going to have to rent a place. This Medicare won't cover this. Here it's covered if it's a rehab issue. So I do think those hospitals are going to, it sounds like they're on full tilt to go. I think most of them are shooting relatively smaller, but I think their idea is that these hospitals will be more set up to stabilize issues and to get people into a nice stable situation. They can be transported and not in an emergency context, because that's certainly the issue. If it's a real emergency, trying to get to Guadalajara Hospital is a nightmare. So if you have a place that has it working relatively well and has all the accoutrements they need to stabilize and keep people, then they give them that option to move on. So I think there's going to generally be smaller hospitals, but I think that's their plan that I've been told.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer all your questions. Don't pin him against the wall, but I'm sure he'll hang out here for a bit to talk.
Thank you all very much. Enjoy your lives.
Please turn on your cell phones if you're so inclined. Stack your chairs, pick up your coffee cups. Thank you for bringing your own coffee cups. We appreciate it. We're trying to be green. We'll see you next week, and take your conversations outside if you could, please.